So, Stephen D here on Pure 24/7 Radio, and we are, as ever, joined by our good friend Bob Goody. Hello, Bob.
Good morning, Stephen. Nice to be with you again.
It's great to have you on. And very, very exciting. You're now one of the presenters here at Pure 24/7 Radio.
I am. It means I've upgraded my microphone and my settings this end, but yeah, so excited to be part of the family full time. Well, long term, let's say. I'm not
Yeah.
on every day. Don't worry if you're listening.
But this is our penultimate conversation as part of this segment, talking about rural missions and what that gets up to. So, before we start, what is rural missions? Give us an overview.
Yeah, so we are a charity that works across the UK, and our sole responsibility is to work with the under-resourced, undervalued, underloved rural churches. So those out in the sticks, in the small villages, the market towns, and places like that, and helping them to understand that Jesus still matters for everyone. And it's our responsibility to get out there and to share Jesus with our communities. So we offer a whole load of free support and resources to help them to do that.
And this is your, full-time job. This is what you get up to. But for you, I imagine it's probably more than just a job.
Oh, without a doubt, it's definitely more than a job. I don't just want to do a job for job's sake. And anyone that's listening that is a Christian and involved in charity work or in church-based work, you'll know I'm definitely not in it for the finance and all those kind of glamorous perks. But actually, I see the difference that sharing Jesus can make with individuals, with communities. And actually, it's a real part of my own journey because I've not always been a Christian. And it took somebody with a friendly heart and a giving attitude to actually introduce me to who Jesus is and what that could mean for me. So this is definitely more than a job. I long to equip people and release people to make a difference in Jesus' name wherever they are, because we're all meant to do something with this hope that we have and not just keep it to ourselves.
That's really cool. And so, obviously, very passionate about what you do. How have you come to be so passionate? You mentioned before, and you just mentioned now how that might have come about. So let's just hear some of your story in terms of how you came to be as passionate as you are now.
Yeah, I think I alluded to it about the second episode in. So we're now 11 weeks into our conversation. And I think because this is the bedrock for all of it, it would be a shame for me not to be able to share some of that. So I grew up in a market town called Mansfield, which is where I now still live. Like, it's a bustling place, got all its own issues as with anywhere. And I was born into a ready-made family. So I've got a brother and sister from my mum's first marriage, David and Elizabeth, and they've grown up with me. We've journeyed along life together. They're 6 and 8 years older than me, something like that. You know, when someone asks, how old are your brothers and sisters, and you can never remember.
Yeah.
But we grew up, and I thought it was just a typical household. But the thing that I didn't realize in my childhood days was how much my brother and sister and my mum wanted to keep me out of our house. They didn't want me to be around on my own. They didn't want me to just be milling about. And I never really understood growing up why that was. I just went along with the journey. I've got people that are engrossed in my life, like my brother took me everywhere with him. We used to go play football and snooker, and we'd always be out. And sadly, that was because my house wasn't a typical household. Actually, my dad was abusive to my family. Not to me, because I was his, which is a weird thing to say, but to my brother, to my sister, to my mum, physically, emotionally, verbally. And so all they were doing was trying to keep me out of the way so I didn't witness that and I didn't grow up with that being my lasting memory of childhood. And it was only when I was around maybe 10 or 11 that I started to spot the signs of it and what was happening, and like why did my sister end up walking into a door, or uh, how come people keep falling down the stairs in our household, and that kind of scenario. So it was not a place of hope. It was not a place of happiness. There were elements of it. My mum did so well to keep us safe and protected, but we didn't have another family around us, like a church family. We didn't have that strong community that were looking out for us. And so I grew up very quickly. Hanging around with someone who's much older, it was one of those needs must. So actually, by the time I was 12, I was a DJ. I had my own business and travelled around doing kids' parties and weddings and bar mitzvahs, and whatever needed a disco at it, I used to go and do. And not many 12-year-olds would say that they were doing wedding discos, but it was just one more thing in keeping me out of the house, keeping me safe. And then when I was in my upper school, I was in the drama group, and the teacher I don't know whether he couldn't remember my name, but he called me by the character I played in my very first school play, which was Bob the barman. So, weird fact, my name's not Bob.
That's a funny thing. I remember when you first mentioned that, I was completely thrown.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mic drop moment. So my real first name is Andrew, and I played this character called Bob and had a bit of a limp and just had to deliver this drink to the front of the stage. But over-egged it that much, I ended up with a few lines of script in the play, and have gone by Bob since, I was 11 or 12 years old. So I'm not going to tell you how old I am now, but it's been a good number of years. More than half my life.
It's actually really cool that name has stuck, and the story behind it. Not many people can say, "Oh, by the way, the name that you call me isn't actually my name."
Yeah, I've added it in because at one point I did explore being a vicar, and I would have to legally be Reverend Andrew, and everyone would be like, "Who's he?" So I did add it in as a middle name.
Cool.
So yeah, back to that. That was my life. That was my upbringing. At age 13, my mum ended up seeing another guy, had an affair. My dad did the same, had an affair, and they separated. So I was like, oh, finally, some peace, a bit of respite. But my dad invited my mum round to apologise to her and cook her a meal. And I was out DJing a wedding. My brother was out, my sister was out. There was no one else around. And as my mum walked into the house, my dad locked the door behind her and took the key out. And fortunately, she had a mobile, which they weren't that commonplace back then. And she managed to get a phone call off to the police, who came and broke in. My mum ended up in intensive care. My dad ended up with handcuffs on and took away in a police car, but not after he'd also assaulted a police officer and broke the police officer's leg. So I get this phone call about 9 o'clock at night from my brother saying mum's in hospital and dad's in prison. So fortunately, I was DJing in a place where I knew people. So somebody took over doing the disco. The manager of the club took me to the hospital, and my mum ended up with a rod in her shoulder to hold it together. But that following week, she then dropped all charges against my dad. So my dad ended up with some community service and a fine for assaulting a police officer, but I didn't see the justice that he deserved, which there's an element of grace and forgiveness and mercy and all that, but in that moment, I just couldn't understand it. And there's a whole set of scenarios and situations that actually go into all of that. And so I just started to process through, and I decided enough was enough. So I gave up on what family looked like and just did my own thing, tried to find hope in the bottle of a glass. So at age 13, I looked in my 20s. So I was served in bars and shops and wherever I needed to be. So that's what I did. I started to drink during the day and start to descend into this little whirlwind at 13 of what's the point to life, really?
Wow, that's quite a story. I mean, so life wasn't great when you started out. I mean, even 11-year-old, you could see that things weren't great, and then they just got exponentially worse. And as naturally happens when we're in those sorts of situations, we try to look for some kind of hope or healing or something, and often we find it in the wrong places, which is what happened to you. So what happened next?
So I know you're waiting on tenterhooks here.
Yeah.
So because of that, I went from being this A-star student at school and really getting involved in a huge amount of stuff and ended up drinking during the day. My drama teacher welcomed me with open arms to come and just hang out backstage and to sleep on the settee backstage. Or he said, I'd sooner you be here than out drinking or out on the streets or whatever. So he was a real beacon of hope in the midst of all this. Like, he wasn't a Christian, but he just saw something in me and he saw the heartbreak that I was going through. So he was a real safe haven for the next couple of years. And I still was in every school play, still went to every rehearsal at lunchtime and after school. I might not have gone to my lessons, but I went to the rehearsals and he stuck up for me with other teachers. But as I descended into this chaos still, I ended up meeting the wrong people, because if you try and find it in the bottom of a glass during the daytime, you meet some shady people and they try to offer you other stuff. So ended up getting involved in Class A and Class B drugs around age 14, coming up to 15. And then because I'd always been into rock music, I used to frequent Rock City in Nottingham often. And by being there during the day and at gigs all the time, again, I just had a random group of people walk up to me one day and say, there's 12 of us in our group and we need a 13th. Do you fancy joining us? We do a bit of dancing around. We do a few things. It'll be fun. So I inadvertently joined a satanic coven, as you do at 15. So
Whoa.
it was a weird world. It was messed up, and everywhere I looked, I just couldn't see hope. I couldn't see a way out of it all. And that's the position I stayed in until just after my exams had finished, the last day of my exams, having walked away, having been an A-star student, I walked away with 3 GCSEs in the end. But it was the day of my final exam that I started to see some hope on the horizon.
Some hope. Well, as you say, I'm on tender hooks here. This is quite a story. You've taken us through quite a journey of some real hardships and real challenges, and I presume there's a happier ending coming our way. So, I mean, what happens next?
There certainly is a happy ending, because you can see that I'm sat here this morning. I've not got a drink in my hand. I'm coherent, so it's all good. There is hope. So I wandered into Mansfield after my final exam and saw an open door of an old snooker hall that used to be above this row of shops. And I used to go in there often, and I thought, oh, what's happened to it? And so there I was walking down the street, full goth gear, like chains. I'd got spikes coming out my neck, like I'd got white face, I'd got black nails, I'd even got a knife down the side of my leg. Like, I wasn't the kind of guy that you'd want to stop in the street and have a nice chat with. And off I wander into this open door, walking up these stairs, and I see this guy appear at the top in a tracksuit with his socks tucked into the bottom of his tracky bottoms and this baseball cap on. And I thought, here we go. It's time to have a bit of a ruckus. And the guy just looked at me and smiled. And he said, hey, welcome. Come on in. Why don't you come on up? Do you want a free drink? I'm like, great. Of course I do. Yes, please. And he gave me a free pint of Pepsi Max. And he said, oh, yeah, we're a non-alcoholic bar. We're open every day of the week, straight after school until late into the evening. We're open Saturdays. Then on Sundays, we've got a Bible study in here, but you're more than welcome to come. And I was like, what do you mean? Well, we're a Christian-run youth centre set up by the churches locally because we want to love, care, and help young people to know that there is hope in the midst of all of this life that they're going through. And I was like, oh, okay. And I got chatting to him, and they'd got pool tables and computers and PlayStations, loads of people just hanging about from all walks of life and background. There was a little group of Christians gathered around this table with a Bible in the middle, and they were chatting about Bible things at that point. And I was like, this is great. You mean I can just come in and be in here? They're like, yeah, you don't have to buy anything. You don't have to be a certain way. We just want you to know there's a place you can come and be yourself. And for one of the first times in my life, I felt really accepted for who I was, not what I brought to the table. And it didn't matter what my background was, what my upbringing, what my religious or political views were. It was just, Bob, you're welcome here. And so I went in, stayed there all day, went in the next day, the next day, and the next day. And about 2 weeks later, after I'd first walked in, they were going to a big Christian festival called Soul Survivor. And having only known them for what at that point was 4 days, they said, oh yeah, next weekend we're going to be closed for a week because we're all off to this big festival. Do you want to come? We'll pay for your ticket. You don't need to pay anything. You just bring yourself. Do you need a sleeping bag? We've got tents. Like, you just come. We go to this field. Like, there's big worship meetings and all this, but you just come with us. I was like, okay. And so, yeah, I'd known them 2 weeks, and I get into this coach, and about 40, 50 of us head down to Shepton Mallet in Somerset. Quite a trek on this coach. I'd got drink and drugs in my bag, and I made my way to this field for a week.
Wow. So, I mean, we've talked a lot about the value of community. As you say, you could just go to that place and just be. And then when they offered you, and because you felt accepted, they offered you the opportunity to go somewhere, they were going to cover all the costs. You just sort of just went with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Young people, older people, children, we're just looking for some acceptance. We're looking for a space to be ourselves, to find community. And that's partly why I'm so passionate about what I do, is because I want to help communities come together and the church to be at the center of it all, and providing that safe space, that welcome, and ultimately then pointing people towards the God who wants to welcome them in.
Yeah.
So I end up in this. Oh, sorry.
And along the way, a few Pepsi Max.
Yeah. Oh, plenty of Pepsi Max. You'll see my fridge behind me. I've got plenty of Pepsi Max in that fridge at the moment. It's all good. I still continue in that vein. So get to this field. They say, "Oh, we're off to the church service. Do you want to come?" So I was like, "Seeing as you paid, I'll come. There's nothing else to do whilst you're there." And we walk into this big cow shed where normally in the week there's cows in it. So it had a bit of a spruce up and a bit of a clean, but you could still smell cows lived there most of the time. And there was a stage set up, and I was like, this ain't church. There's no pews, and I can only see young people and a few adults looking after them, but there's no old people, and there's no organ. There's none of that here. And then the intro comes, they do a Mexican wave to start the meeting, and then a young guy called Matt Redman starts to lead worship, and I'm like, he's got a guitar. Why have they got a drum kit on stage? And for the first time in my life, I experienced what church could be, and not just the typical going through the motions, but as the worship started, as people sang and people danced and people cried, I just watched them. And I was like, you mean this? This isn't just going through the motions. This isn't someone's telling me I've got to do this. This is, you're genuinely calling out to this God. And in my head, I was going, I want this. My heart was leaping out for it. I was like, I want what they've got. And I knew some of the stories of people that I'd come with, and I knew the backgrounds they'd had and how they'd been set free from it by this God. And I ended up going out and sitting in a field and just going, what is it? Are you actually real, God? And the next day I went to the youth worker and said, what is it? What have you guys got? And he explained in its very simplistic forms who Jesus was and what it would mean for me to find forgiveness, to find love, to find hope and acceptance, to find restoration. And it probably took him a minute, 2 minutes for me to really grasp Jesus is who he said he was. And Jesus is in the business of transforming lives. And I can't believe that he did this for me. And then he said those words that Christian youth workers love to say, and we'd all hope we get to a point of, would you like me to pray for you? Why don't we pray together and invite Jesus to come into this relationship with you? And I went, no. I was so annoyed at that point that nobody in my 16 years previous had ever told me what I now had just heard. I was like, why have the church never told me? Why have I been through all this chaos and mess? Why have I ended up being addicted to drugs, addicted to alcohol? How have I ended up in a coven? How have I ended up down this route? And nobody has thought to tell me what this guy's just told me in 2 minutes.
Wow. I mean, I can imagine if you see the truth of it and just wondering why have I never heard this. I can really appreciate that. And I think you won't be the first person who said those words. How come no one's ever told me before?
Yeah.
It's a very stark, common message, unfortunately, that sense of why has no one ever told me? So you said no. How did you come to a place of eventually saying yes, I guess?
Yeah, so it wasn't a no for long. So that evening I went to the main meeting. Again, I wanted to make sure it wasn't just a one-off, and I watched people again. I listened to the sermon. It was a guy called Simon Gilbo, who was talking about being a missionary and what it means to share Jesus in whatever context you're in. And he was specifically trying to point people towards going abroad.
Mm.
But I was like, no, that's not me. And then he just said, if anyone wants prayer for any of what I've spoke about or anything else, then come forward. And within seconds, I was stood there at the front of this cowshed in front of a bloke I'd never met, going, I want to know Jesus. And bless him, this young guy came over to me. He must have been about the same age as me, like 16. And I said, I want to know Jesus. And he was like, oh, let me get someone. And I was then introduced to a guy called Bob who, bless him, is now with our Father up in heaven. He's at peace. But Bob came over, and again, he said, don't let this be a hype thing. Just because you're at a festival, you don't need to do this. I would love to introduce you to Jesus. This is what it means. This is who he is. And again, he just re-explained the simplicity of the gospel. And he said, if that's what you want, then let's pray together. And we prayed. And as we prayed, I could feel such an overwhelming sense of love, such an overwhelming freedom and release from things that were holding me. And my youth worker, who knew my story, had come up with me. He was stood behind, and he turned to Bob and said, we need to deal with a few things. So I was whisked off into a side room at this cowshed with a good team of prayer warriors, because I'd got addictions, I was in a cult, and all of those things. So we needed to make sure I was well and truly prayed for. And by the end of that night, I knew that Jesus was real. I knew without a shadow of a doubt, like nobody will ever convince me of anything other than that. and I was set free instantly from my addictions. So I've never had a problem with alcohol. I didn't drink for 5 years after that day. And now I've never drunk to excess, never had any inkling whatsoever of leaning back towards drugs, never been down that route. All the bonds that were tied with this coven, actually, most of them are now Christians. I was stalked by them for a while because you can't just leave one. But I now know a lot of them are in Christian ministry themselves. And so at the end of that night, I then rang my mum and rang my dad and apologized for how I'd been, told them that I'd met Jesus and that I forgave them and asked for their forgiveness for how I'd been with them both, and have a restored relationship with both of them. Like, I won't lie, it's not perfect. There are still times when me and my dad don't see eye to eye, but that's part of being human. But I pray for them. I pray for my entire family. They're still yet to know Jesus, but I firmly believe they will meet him before they meet him up there. And so at the end of that night, again, I just turned to the youth worker and said, no one can go through the mess, the life that I have, without knowing the truth that I now know. I'm committing myself from this day forward to make sure everyone has an opportunity to hear and to respond to following Jesus. So
Wow.
actually, I walked out of Soul Survivor back into Mansfield and went to working full time in that youth club, working in schools, doing assemblies and RE lessons. And for the last 25 years, so people can figure out how old I am, that is what I've done. I've helped to introduce people to Jesus, and my job now is helping Christians really get what it means to help people find Jesus for themselves. So that's the heart behind what I do. And that's why I'm so passionate about the church cracking on and talking about Jesus in everyday situations and in special programs and projects and all those kind of things.
Yeah. I mean, it's that moment when you said, how come no one had ever told me? I suppose that's the most chilling thing from all of that story. There's loads of hardship and there's loads of very similar stories of people out there who end up going to drugs or alcohol, who end up in all kinds of different problems. And that the most chilling thing from all that you spoke about was that statement of how come no one had ever told me? And that's why something needs to be done. As you say, church needs to get cracking on
Yeah.
and making sure that there's no one else with that same statement of how come no one ever told me. That is a very, very chilling thing to realize and acknowledge. And it's a big part of why we've been having these conversations. How do we reach out into those communities? Because the way that you were able to begin this journey of healing and reconciliation was through just being allowed to just be. Through a Pepsi Max was perhaps part of that, but it was just a place where you could be, and there was that community reaching out. And so I guess that's the story behind why you're so passionate about what you do. As we said at the start, this isn't just a job for you.
No. Yeah, the amount of lives that I've seen transformed simply because someone took time out of their day to do what they would normally do. Like, talking about Jesus doesn't have to be for specific times and places. Like, what does it look like to invite someone for a cup of coffee? And we'll often talk about life, like, what's the football doing? How's the family? Like, why does Jesus need to be a separate part of that? And actually bringing him into the everyday could mean a revolutionary move for the person that you're sat in front of. So I know lots of people that have become Christians just because someone took them for a drink, took them for a coffee, gave them a Pepsi Max. It can transform lives. There are other drinks available.
Yes, I was just going to say the same thing. Yeah, it is so important that people have that place to simply be. And that's such an important part of your testimony, such an important part of your journey. So thank you so much for sharing that for us. I mean, I mentioned that I was on tender hooks. I was just gripped by hearing your story. I imagine that is the same for many others, hearing how you came to be where you are today. And it's been really inspiring listening to you share that story and considering what that might mean for us. It's challenging, it's encouraging. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
No, it's a pleasure. Thanks for listening.
Excellent. So that's the passion and heart behind what you do for Rural Missions. Do you want to just give us the website before we end today?
Yeah, so if we can be of any help, head to ruralmissions.org.uk. So we do have a specialist department looking at how do we engage children, young people and families. So if anything I've said has raised something, you want to question something, or you just value a chat or someone to come and share a testimony in your own church, then just get in touch. We'd love to be able to support you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you.
Here at Pure 247 Radio, we've had the privilege of speaking to some amazing people with some amazing stories.
I was about 5k off the coast paddling, and I was watching this storm on the land, and it literally hit a mountain, and rather than just going over the top of it, just turned and just came straight at me. You can't stay on the board in that instance, so I literally am jumping off the back of the board. I've got everything tethered down on the board, and I'm just holding on to the back of the board.
As I walked in, there was a fight going on the floor. There was a police sergeant sailing over the desk to help with restraining somebody. And the doors were clanging shut, all the big metal gates, and there were alarms going off and radios. And I felt this most enormous peace come over me because I realised that this is where God wanted me to spend my career behind bars.
It was like a baptism of fire, and it was like the most socially deprived council wards in Britain. And then we were going into schools, and then kids were coming to the gigs, but then knocking on my door at night, and I was out there playing football till 11:30 p.m. at night, 12 o'clock, feeding kids, running youth clubs.
If you've missed an inspiring conversation and want to catch up, or you'd like to revisit a brilliant interview, you can. Our interviews are available on YouTube and podcast, so you can always catch up anytime you like. Search for Pure 247 Radio wherever you get your podcasts, or find our YouTube channel at Pure 247 Radio, or head over to www.pure247radio.org/catch up.